Hello, everybody. Tonight we're gonna read Evelyn Underhill's book called Mysticism, studying the nature and development of spiritual consciousness. What was I doing? Practicing. Oh, I was saying the name of the book that I wrote. Like, it's The Art of Loving and Being Loved. That's the subtitle. Anyway, because I gave my book away to someone this morning. All right, so I'll show you. Studying the Nature and Development of Spiritual Consciousness. It's from 1910. I just got back in my car, so I was like, all right, I have an hour. Let's do it. Let's enter in. Now, Evelyn Underhill influenced C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and Charles Williams. Charles Williams was part of the Inkling group. And, sorry, this jacket. All right, we'll just leave it on if it doesn't come. I was just skating, so I'm all... Anyway, I don't need to talk about it. Okay, whatever, let's go. My name is Dr. Cheryl Meyer. I'm a psychologist in my day job. And so there's a lot of psychology in this, and I study mysticism, I study theology. And so sometimes I'll make comments. It just depends on the night. So welcome, subscribe to my channel, because if you got this video, it's like a miracle, because the YouTube just doesn't know what to do with my algorithms, so they don't always push out my videos. So so subscribe while you have a chance. And let's see if there's anything else. Oh yeah, so I have a playlist for this book, so you can totally start here. And let's see. Oh, look, I had to turn the phone around while the balloon's coming down. There's a balloon where I am. Look. There's people go up and down in that balloon. Anyway, that's where I am. I'm at a park in Southern California. And okay, now we're ready. Okay, so right now we're on the section of the book, here we are, called The Mystic Way. And there's just so much that came before. How this came about was just, I was going to read this book myself. This is on my list for the next book to read. And I just thought, I want to share this. So I decided to start reading it on my YouTube channel. All right, so let's just start. I think I ended. Okay, so I just went for a week-long Eckhart Tolle teaching on how to become a teacher of presence, 6 days with him in Canada. And so it's funny because I just got back, and she says in Eckhart's writing, but she's talking about Meister Eckhart, a 13th century mystic, German mystic, Christian writer who just is profound in what he writes. It's so beautiful. I wish I could read German to read it, because you don't always know what people are writing in translations, and if they don't get the mystic part, then they're not translating it correct oftentimes. Anyway, in Eckhart's, I trust Evelyn's understanding of it, right? She's really good at this. In Eckhart's writings, enthusiastic description of the quiet, of inward silence. Okay, we're on this part of this chapter called Introversion, Recollection, and Quiet. All right, so welcome. In Eckhart's writings, enthusiastic descriptions of the quiet, with a capital Q, of inward silence and passivity as the fruit of a deliberate recollection abound. In his view, this psychical state of quiet is preeminently that in which the soul of man begins to be united with its ground, pure being. All right, so this is actually what the whole 6 days was. Eckhart Tolle took his name, that's not his real name, from Meister Eckhart, actually. That's, I wonder when he changed his name, but anyway, but we were practicing presence, and so it's how to become a teacher of presence. I'll get a certificate in 3 months, but I got my doctorate 20 years ago, so, as a psychologist. But anyway, it's cool because it's really nice to be around. We were around like 700 other people, practicing coming back into this oneness, the oneness which we came from divine love. And I don't know how to, we're learning how to define these things. You can't really put it into words or say I mean, you can. You use discernment to see where people are off and where people really are teaching the same quiet, you know, and where people are trying to like find salvation in the quiet, you know, and there's overlap. It's like a Venn diagram. But anyway, I trust you guys. Use discernment, you know. I read Evelyn Underhill because I love her perspective, she's going really deep, but she's not going into weird things that, I mean, it's all weird to your mind, you know, your mind doesn't understand this, but she's not going in like the occult stuff, because that can get you really off path. Anyway, and you don't need it. I love it. I love there's this part in Teresa of Avila, Saint Teresa of Avila, is that how you say it? But she was from the 1400s, around contemporary of Saint John of the Cross, and she's just like, you don't need to study the occult. And it was just like, she had so many profound experiences, but our egotism will always think we need something out there, or something, you know, that's more tangible, and that's how the occult appeals to people. But you don't need it. You really don't. I trust Saint Teresa of Avila, you know. She wrote the book Interior Castle. And anyway. All right. In Eckhart's writings, enthusiastic descriptions of the quiet, of inward silence and passivity as the fruit of a deliberate recollection abound. In his view, the psychical state of quiet is preeminently that in which the soul of man begins to be united with its ground, pure being, with capital P and B. Pure. Here, I'll show you. Just so you see it. Pure being right here. And that's where I did put the link to the PDF because it's free, because it was written in 1910. That's why I can read it without worrying about copyright. Right? The emptying of the field of consciousness, its cleansing of all images, even of those symbols of reality which are the subjects of meditation, is the necessary condition under which alone this encounter can take place. The soul, he says, with all its powers, has divided and scattered itself in outward things, each according to its functions. The power of sight in the eye, the power of hearing in the ear, the power of taste in the tongue, and thus they are the less able to work inwardly, for every power which is divided is imperfect. So the soul, if she would work inwardly, must call home all her powers and collect them from all divided things to one inward work. He must pour all his powers into himself as into a corner of the soul, and must hide himself from all images and forms. And then he can work. Then he must come into a forgetting, a not knowing. You know, like the book, The Cloud of Unknowing. You go up beyond the clouds into this place of unknowing. He must be in a stillness and silence, where the word, with a capital W, word, may be heard. One cannot draw near to this word better than by stillness and silence. Then it is heard and understood in utter ignorance. When one knows nothing, it's opened and revealed. Then we shall become aware of the divine ignorance, and our ignorance will be ennobled and adorned with supernatural knowledge. And then we simply keep ourselves receptive. We are more perfect than when at work. That's an end quote. Meister Eckhart wrote all of that. Wow. The soul, he says, with all its powers has divided and scattered itself in outward things, each according to its functions. The power of sight in the eye, the power of hearing in the ear, the power of taste in the tongue, and thus they are the less able to work inwardly. For every power which is divided is imperfect. So we're talking about coming back to this oneness. I've been doing this lately in my videos. Look, the balloon's like an example for us, you know, going up out of this world of duality, right? And up into the one hot air balloon in the sky. It's like that. I'm gonna move. That's what I was leaning down for, taking my roller skates off, so I can move my car because they keep playing this techno music, and then it makes us feel, I don't know, it makes me feel like I'm in a club or something, which is fine, but not for this. I don't know. Whatever. All right, you guys, I'm used to like speaking without a filter sometimes. Okay, so let me get to a good place, because then I can discuss it. We're just going to move to the other end of the parking lot. Or maybe they'll stop the music. Just be present. I invite you to take deep breaths. Use this video to be really that alert presence, you know? I like how this guy named John Butler, he's like a mystic Christian. He's so rad. He's so great. I live in California, so I learned that word. But he says feet on the ground, you know, because when you focus getting your feet on the still ground, it takes all of this concentration out of your head, out of your thoughts, out of the chattering thoughts, you know. Okay, so we keep ourselves receptive. We are more perfect than when at work. The psychic state of quiet has a further value for the mystic as being the intellectual complement and expression of the moral state of humility and receptivity. That reminds me of Rumi, the Rumi quote. He says, get rid of your cleverness and enter into like wonder. It's something like that, you know. Something by the Wonderful, you know. That one, there's a song like that. This moral state of humility and receptivity, the very condition, says Eckhart, of the new birth. Quote, it may be asked whether this birth is best accomplished in man when he does his work and forms and thinks himself into God, or when he keeps himself in silence, stillness, and peace, so that God may speak and work in him. And then there's an ellipsis. The best and noblest way in which thou mayest come into this work and life is by keeping silence and letting God work and speak. When all the powers are withdrawn from their work and images, there is this word spoken. You see how it takes humility, because I know as a psychologist and as a person, from our shame from childhood, I was just talking about that in a video I made for today for my YouTube channel, for, you know, a teaching video or whatever, like come alongside you video. I was talking about like sometimes we're afraid to go in the silence because it's a space for our shame and our pain from childhood, from the programming that we took in about our worth, and that's not really our worth and all this stuff. It comes up first, and it's like, but once you keep going to divine love, to God, you know, I wear this, it's like drop down from your head into your heart. Once you keep going into that, it like burns away all of that, and you become more and more comfortable with just surrendering. And it is a kind of humility, but it's not humiliation, but it feels like it will be at first. Just FYI, if you haven't gone here yet. When all the powers are withdrawn from their work and images, there is this word spoken. Eckhart's view of the primary importance of quiet, that was the end quote of that, essentially the introverted state, is shared by all of those medieval mystics who lay stress on the psychological rather than the objective aspect of the spiritual life. They regard it as the necessary preliminary of all contemplation and describe it as a normal phase of the inner experience, possible of attainment by all of those who have sufficiently disciplined themselves in patience, recollection, and humility. And she talked about it last hour that we read. Recollection is not like remembering something, it's recalling yourself into this, like I wear this ring, because Jesus says when you pray, go into your inner room, like where this diamond is in the middle, you know, and shut the door and speak to your Father there, and he'll hear you in that silent place, you know. And so it's like that. It's like you're recollecting yourself and letting go of everything into this deep self. In a certain old English mystical work, which still remains in MS, I don't know what MS stands for, one of the group of treatises of the 14th century, of which The Cloud of Unknowing, wow, I didn't know she was going to mention that, is the best known. There is a curious and detailed instruction on the disposition of mind proper to this horizon of silence. It clearly owes much to the teaching of the Areopagites, something perhaps to Eckhart himself, and something surely, if we may judge by its vivid and exact instructions, to personal experience. Quote, "When thou comest by thyself," says the master to the disciple for whom this epistle was composed, "think not before what thou shalt do after, but forsake as well good thoughts as evil thoughts, and pray not with thy mouth, but lift thee right well, ellipsis, and look that nothing live in thy working mind, but a naked intent stretching unto God, not clothed in any special thought of God in thyself, how he is in himself, or in any of his works, but only that he is as he is. He is as he is, the I am that I am. Let him be so, I pray thee, and make him on none otherwise speech, nor search in him by subtlety of wit, but believe by thy ground. This naked intent, freely fastened and grounded by very belief, shall be naught else to thy thought and thy feeling but a naked thought and a blind feeling of thine own being. That darkness be thy mirror, and thy mind whole. Think no further of thyself than I'd bid thee do of thy God, so that thou be one with him in spirit as in thought, without departing and scattering. For he is thy being, and in him thou art, that thou art, not only by cause and by being, but also he is in thee, both thy cause and thy being. And therefore think on God as in this work, as thou dost on thyself, and on thyself as thou dost on God. And that he is as he is, and thou art as thou art, and that thy thought be not scattered, nor departed, but prived in him that is all. Let him be so, I pray thee. It is an admonition against spiritual worry, an entreaty to the individual already at work, twisting experience to meet his own conceptions, right? To let things be as they are, to receive and to be content. Because that's our mind that tries to make it how we think it ought to be, right? How do we know? And that's what I was going to say. Hold on. Leave off doing that you may be. Leave off analysis that you may know. That meek darkness by the mirror, humble receptivity, is the watchword of this state. In this, says Eckhart finally, the soul is of equal capacity with God. As God is boundless in giving, so the soul is boundless in receiving. And as God is almighty in his work, so the soul is an abyss of receptivity. And so she is formed anew with God and in God. The disciples of Saint Dionysius, that's who she was talking about, the Areopagite, the disciples of Saint Dionysius asked him why Timotheus surpassed them all in perfection. Then said Dionysius, Timotheus is receptive of God, and thus thine ignorance is not a deficit, but thy highest perfection, and thine inactivity thy highest work. And so in this work thou must bring all thy works to naught and all thy powers into silence, if thou wilt in truth experience this birth within thyself, right? All right. Oh, she's going to talk about Saint Teresa. I just saw. Okay. I'm going to move real quick, but what I was going to share real quick is that I learned from this Native American Christian shaman, Red Elk. I went and met with him for 3 days. And he said, I'm not going to look at the camera when I move. Hold on. He said that I'm part Native American, so he said that the Native Americans call this thing Matakiwashin. They say we're in the mind womb of God, and so we're in God's dream. And so in a way, God knows everything that's going on in this dream, right? And it's hard for us to conceptualize, like with all these billions of people. But for God, it's easy. I learned from another Native American, that taught this man that I trained from. And he had said that it's like if a bunny walked across your chest. So if you're lying down on the grass, you know, you're going to know that that happened, right? All right. Oh, no parking permit required. Okay. I was going to go. There's a carousel right here. Oh, I won't pick up my phone because I'm driving. Anyway, so we're in the mind womb of God. So that's how all of this can come about. That's how, let's see if there's a spot here. All right, I can back up into this one. Okay, so that's how we can, sometimes people describe it like a drop in the ocean, you know, and if you know yourself as this drop, but once you join in the ocean, then you feel like you're one with everything, okay? And so wouldn't that make sense that you feel one with everything in that moment? You're not the one, though, that created all of the ocean. That example I like a lot, because you're not the one that created the ocean. But if someone asks you, who are you? You're like, I am the ocean. So it feels like you are God. Like I heard someone who, like, let's say if you could speak with angels, I'll keep it like a mystic, whatever experience, was like, you know, if you ask the angels, Michael, Raphael, Uriel, El means God, you know, it's a different ray or element of God. They would say, I am God, because they're one with God. Not that they are the ones that created, but I mean, that were the creator, like, but the word God, a lot of the time in Psalm 23, you say, the Lord, the I am, is my shepherd, is my best friend, is my shepherd. Or when the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing, because you're back. I got closer, the balloon's just going up right now. I lack nothing. I lack no thing. And there's the carousel. All right. Okay. So let's go back. That's so funny. It always happens like that, right? You try to go away from one noise and then another one happens. It can, because what you resist persists. So I try not to resist. The dad is just making his son laugh. All right. Okay, so the next part, it says, so I hope that helped you understand what we just described. You're moving into this I amness, the I am of God, and the I am within yourself, the I am that I am, the isness of yourself. All right, here, hold on, because I cover up children. Okay. Now they're coming back. That's funny. All right. Okay. It is interesting to contrast these descriptions of the quiet with St. Teresa's temperamental reaction on the same psychological state. Where the English mystics teaching is full, there's an English person that wrote The Cloud of Unknowing. It's anonymous, but they knew it was written in England a long, long time ago. Where the English mystic's teaching is full of an implied appeal to the will, the Spanish saint is all for the involuntary, or as she would call it, the supernatural actions of the soul. This true horizon of quiet, she says, has in it an element of the supernatural. We cannot, in spite of all of our efforts, procure it for ourselves. It is a sort of peace in which the soul establishes herself, or rather in God, which establishes the soul, as he did the righteous Simeon. Saint Simeon, who predicted Christ, I think that's who she's talking about, who, when Christ came, he said, you know, my soul doth magnify. No, wait, he said, for I've seen the Lord, you know, I say it like every night, now let thy servant depart in peace, according to thy word, for mine eyes have seen thy salvation. When he saw Christ, he saw that. Now, one book I read said that he was 365 years old. which it's hard for people these days to understand that that could have happened 200 years ago. I mean, 2,000 years ago. Sorry, my math. Anyway. I'm just thinking of how long Noah was in the ark. Noah, I think, was in the ark the same amount of months as a baby, stays in a woman's belly. Because God can put symbols wherever God wants. Let it be in real things. Anyway, okay. Let's do this. It seems to her, okay, so Saint Simeon, okay, and as he did the righteous Simeon, all her powers are at rest. She understands, but otherwise than by the senses, that she is already near her God, and that if she draws a little nearer, she will become by union one with him. She does not see this with the eyes of the body, nor with the eyes of the soul. And that's ellipsis. It is like the repose of a traveler who, within sight of the goal, stops to take a breath and then continues with new strength upon his way. One feels a great bodily comfort, a great satisfaction of soul. Such is the happiness of the soul in seeing herself close to the spring, that even without drinking of the waters, she finds herself refreshed. It seems to her that she wants nothing more. The faculties which are at rest would like always to remain still. Okay, it's so funny because when they're talking about this, I think of Mordor. As soon as Samwise and Frodo see the steps to Mordor, I'm like, yeah, it's like you can take a deep breath even though they haven't had anything to drink in so long and they're dehydrated and parched and they don't know what's going to happen next, how they're going to accomplish destroying the ring. I won't total spoiler alert it, but I recommend The Lord of the Rings. I recommend it so much. It's such a good path to teach you how to stay on your spiritual path, and how to not be discouraged, and how to keep surrendering, keep dying to yourself every day. The whole book is about doing that. Tolkien had to face one of the wars, and watch a bunch of his friends die. And I mean, I heard he knew 50 languages. I don't know if he knew that many. Some people say 30. My C.S. Lewis professor said 50, but maybe it's like, you catch that fish and it keeps growing bigger and bigger. But 30 is enough to be fluent in, Okay. So she understands, but otherwise than by the senses, that she is already near her God, and that if she draws a little nearer, she will become by union one with him. She does not see this with the eyes of the body, nor with the eyes of the soul. It's like the repose of a traveler who, within the sight of the goal, stops to take a breath and then continues with new strength upon his way. One feels a great bodily comfort, a great satisfaction of soul. Such is the happiness of the soul in seeing herself close to the spring, that even without drinking of the waters, she finds herself refreshed. It seems to her that she wants nothing more. The faculties which are at rest would like always to remain still, for the least of their movements is able to trouble or prevent her love. It just blocks you. You just want to stay in that state of bliss. Those who are in this horizon wish their bodies to remain motionless, for it seems to them that at the least movement they will lose this sweet peace. They are in the palace close to their, and there's an ellipsis, they are in the palace close to their king, and they see that he begins to give them his kingdom. It seems to them that they are no longer in the world, that they wish neither to hear nor to see, but only God. There is this difference between the horizon of quiet and that in which the whole soul is united to God. That in this last, the soul has not to absorb the divine food. God deposits it with her, and she knows not how. The horizon of quiet, on the other hand, demands, it seems to me, a slight effort, but it is accompanied by so much sweetness that one hardly feels it. End quote. That's from Camino de Perfección, The Road of Perfection, chapter 33. It says the whole chapter, which is a marvel of subtle analysis, should be read in this connection. That's so cool that she wrote that in the footnotes. Quote, a slight effort, says St. Teresa, a naked intent, stretching, says the Epistle of Private Counsel. Oh, so a slight effort, says St. Teresa, and then the Cloud of Unknowing, I think she's referring to, says a naked intent, stretching, says the Epistle of Private Counsel. I think that's a different name for it. In these words lies the difference between the true and healthy mystic state of quiet and its morbid perversion in quietism. Okay, so there was a movement called quietism, and I really want to know the difference. She said at the beginning of this chapter, she's going to tell us the difference between, because it was a heresy and people were, I don't know if they were being killed, but they were being kicked out of the church and all this stuff for quietism. I can't remember what year that was, but it was around France, around, I think, Mathilde of Magdeburg had heard of it, and that's around 1600s, I think. I'm not sure, though. Anyway, the morbid perversion in quietism, the difference between the tense stillness of the athlete and the limp passivity of the sluggard, who is really lazy, though he looks resigned. Oh, wow. You know, it's kind of like someone that's smoking something these days versus, and I'm not making fun. When Eckhart Tolle was talking about that, he said, you know, when you learn how to meditate, you go above thought. And when you're smoking something, he said, because he tried it once, I haven't, I'm not trying to be, you know, religious or something, or like self-righteous. It's just, he says, it's taking you below thought. And so it feels similar, but you're going below thought. And I did talk to someone, and oh, I'll just leave it at that. Okay, I always check if I ought to say, and I usually always check if I ought to say something when I'm concerned about, you know, I don't want to ever lead anybody on a path that's not the highest and best. And I can't control everything, but I'll do my best just to stay silent sometimes. Anyway, excuse me. So she said quietism is a morbid perversion. The difference between the tense stillness of the athlete, you know, it's like alert readiness, but, you know, you're flexible, you're ready to do your athletics, and the limp passivity of the sluggard who is really lazy, though he looks resigned. True quiet is a means, not an end. You're not trying to reach the state of quiet. The state of surrendered quietness is sort of, if you think of Mother Mary, like, be it unto me according to thy word. Let it be according to your word. She's an alert presence and surrendered, but it's not like this blind surrender. It's surrender to divine love, to God, to the I am. It's like, when the Lord is my shepherd, then I lack nothing, you know, or it's like, I sang that song before in here, but it's like, give your heart and soul to me, and life will always be la vie en rose, you know. Give your heart and soul to me. That's the first commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. That's how your life gets to be la vie en rose. You know, you see everything through love-colored glasses, rose-colored glasses. There's a little girl on her mommy's back, on piggyback, right? All right. Maybe we'll see a reflection. They're right there, but I don't want it. Oh, there, you get to see the back. All right, sometimes I let us see the back of kids' heads, but I'm really just cautious about letting kids be on. Anyway, Right when I'm talking about how life is just beautiful, right? What's that called? The Bella Vita. The Bella Vita. I kept hearing that song when I was in Turkey and near Ephesus, which means the beautiful life. And it's like Dostoevsky, he says, in the end, the world will be saved by beauty, you know? It's this beauty of this union of mystic love, you know? It's not beauty that saves us, but it's like the beautiful, which is divine love, which is the union state that we remember. Because Plato said all learning is just remembering. You're remembering the state that we came from, you know? Anyway. Okay, so of the sluggard who is really lazy, though he looks resigned, true quiet is a means, not an end, is actively embraced, not passively endured. It is an incident in the self's growth in contemplation, a bridge which leads from its old and uncoordinated life of activity to its new unified life of deep action, the real, quote, mystic life of man. This state is desired by the mystic, not in order that consciousness may remain a blank, but in order that the word, which is alive, may be written thereon. The word with a capital W. Too often, however, this primary fact has been ignored, and the interior silence has been put by wayward transcendentalists to other and less admirable use. Well, I wonder that all the time. I wonder what's the difference, you know? Where is that? Because I don't want to go off path, you know? But I know Meister Eckhart, he said something about it's better to make mistakes and try these things and do than you know, never, because we're always entering into the unknown when we enter into God. And you just ask God, give me wisdom, keep me from evil. You know, that's the Lord's Prayer that we're meant to pray every day. You know, Jesus said, this is how you ought to pray. You know, and you say one of the parts of that, and it's very deep mystic. So it's not just deliver us from evil, but it's like, you know, I heard someone teaching it in Aramaic, and they were saying it's like deliver us from buying in, being hooked into this world of materiality. You know, that's evil. The world of egotism, the world of duality. Deliver us. So you can ask, it can cover a multitude of things, like deliver us from going off path, you know, direct us into this unknown that you want us to know, because this unknown is actually known. It's, you know, be still and know that I am God. You know, we try to make it so complicated. Our egotism wants to say, do all this gymnastics because we think it takes that, but it doesn't take that. Aw, that's so funny. It's as quiet as the danger zone of introversion. I just watched that movie with my mom. She hadn't seen it. And Top Gun is like, highway to the... That's what this is. The highway to the danger zone. I love it when songs come to me, and that's just one of the gifts that I have. Like, it's just a weird, quirky gift that I have. Like, I hear things through songs, you know, concepts will come to me. And I'm like, you know, because I used to ask God, can you explain that to me in a song? And then a song would come. And then I just got used to being sensitive to hearing songs where I am. And then I call myself a lyrical psychologist sometimes, but it's not about me. I'm just saying all of us have different gifts. The Holy Spirit gives you different gifts to feed the body, to help the whole body. Because as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another person. Anyway. And so I have one of Eliot's songs. I did a teaching on it. I have to upload that. I'd like to upload that onto my site, yoursoulsongs.com. And it's talking about dancing on the highway, because he never published that song. So it's free out there before he passed on, my dear friend. And so it's talking about this higher path. I'm dancing. I'm just in the flow, connected to divine love on this highway. And he says, I'm here at my station, because you stay in your station. This is your station, your divine destiny path. All night, you know, in this night of life. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you, the I am, is with me. The I am is with us in this duality. Anyway, so I went off. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Not just enjoyed for like, yeah, but like, I hope that helped take you deeper. I don't want to just talk to talk. True quiet is a means, not an end, is actively embraced, not passively endured, is an incident of the self's growth and contemplation, a bridge which leads from its old and uncoordinated life of activity to its new, unified life of deep action, the real mystic life of man. This state is desired by the mystic, not in order that consciousness may remain a blank, but in order that the word which is alive may be written thereon. Too often, however, this primary fact has been ignored, and the interior silence has been put by wayward transcendentalists to other and less admirable use. Quiet is the danger zone of introversion. All of the forms of mystical activity, perhaps this has been the most abused, the least understood. Its theory, seized upon, divorced from its context, and developed to excess, produced the foolish and dangerous exaggerations of quietism. And these, in their turn, caused a wholesale condemnation of the principle of passivity, and made many superficial persons regard naked horizon as an essentially heretical act. Okay, so we're still dealing with that, is because people abuse that. Just like in the 80s, they used to have like resorts, and they would charge insurance companies for people to get psychological. I know, because my dad was a psychiatrist back in the 80s, and so it's not like they were all trying to take advantage of this, but insurances would pay for people to stay at these resort-like places, and really the calm probably helped their life, but they're charging the insurance companies thousands of dollars, thousands and thousands, kind of like rehabs sometimes do now. They try to make these like horseback riding rehabs, but I understand, because horses can help you stay grounded. I'm not making fun of that. I'm just saying, like, because someone will take advantage and have you spend all this money or take all this money from insurance, then they shut it down, and it's like, then they would not pay for people to go in hospital or whatever, you know what I mean? And so back in the days, people used quietism in some kind of wrong way, and then other people after that would be like, now you can't even be in silence. That's scary, to silence your mind. Don't do that. I heard a lady say that. Poor lady. I love her so much. She used to have these amazing videos, teaching videos, but she was off path, and then I got back on path, and then she corrected herself. But sometimes it's just like when you're in AA, people will be like, I can't, like, I don't want to see alcohol. I don't want to, be near it. And I don't blame them, because they were addicted to that substance for so long. Anyway, but it's kind of like, if there's a religion that, I was listening to this teacher live today. I was at a class, and he was a bishop, but he was talking about how, Mary birthed Christ, and she's in a model, because we're all meant to birth Christ in ourselves. If you understand that. Now, I always welcome all religions, but if you understand that she was a pattern of how our life ought to be, it's like you allow the Holy Spirit to come in, and Christ is born in you, and you are born again in Christ. In a way, you die in your baptism with Christ, and you have this resurrected and this transformed self, And so it's like, if a lot of, like, the Greek Orthodox call Mary Theotokos, the mother of God, because they were talking about Adam was the first Adam, Christ is the second Adam. Eve came out of Adam, and then it was so cool. And then they were talking about Christ came out of Eve, and so it's like the second Adam came out of the woman, and some of the Torah commentaries that I would read is like, Eve and Adam were actually one, and they took Adam, not a rib, but the side of Adam, and separated them. And, so he could have a helpmate, because it was the other half of him, Anyway, it's really cool. But what I was getting at is they're saying, like, if people like worshipped Mary and they didn't do their own work and they didn't know that they're meant to bear Christ themselves and have all this stuff in them, and instead they just keep thinking, let's worship Mary, then it's like now there's all these religions that are like, we can't even recognize Mary, you know, and it's like they hardly recognize her except on the Nativity at Christmas Day, or you know what I mean? And it's like there was something obviously about her that was fully surrendered, that God chose to be born in her, you know, and it's like you can revere her without worshiping a person, you know. But anyway, we know it's like that saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But this happens when people go to an extreme, they overcorrect. Anyway, and these in their turn caused a wholesale condemnation of the principle of passivity and made many superficial persons regard naked horizon as an essentially heretical act. The accusation of quietism has been hurled at many mystics whose only fault was a looseness of language which laid them open to misapprehension. People that don't understand, too, misapprehend them. Others, however, have certainly contrived by a perversion and isolation of the teachings of great contemplatives on this point to justify the deliberate production of a half hypnotic state of passivity. With this meaningless state of absorption in nothing at all, they were content, claiming that in it they were in touch with the divine life and therefore exempt from the usual duties and limitations of human existence. Quietism, usually and rather unfairly spoken of as in connection with Madame Guyon, already existed in a far more dangerous and perverted form in the Middle Ages, and was denounced with violence by Ruysbroek. You know, we talk about him a lot. One of the greatest masters of true introversion whom the Christian world has known. Okay, I have to read that. If she doesn't describe more, I'm gonna research it. I plan to do that, and I'll bring back what I find if I do it soon and I remember. Hopefully, I'll remember. It is important. In case she's quoting him, maybe she'll do it. Quote: "It is important in the spiritual life," he says, "that we should know, denounce, and crush all quietism. These quietists remain in a state of utter passivity, and in order that they may the more tranquilly enjoy their false repose, they abstain from every interior and exterior act. Such a repose is treason to God, a crime of lèse majesté, L-E-S-E with an accent mark. It's French, right? Quietism blinds a man, plunging him into that ignorance which is not superior but inferior to all knowledge. Such a man remains seated within himself, useless and inert. This repose is simply laziness, and this tranquility is forgetfulness of God, oneself, and one's neighbor. It is the exact opposite of the divine peace, the opposite of the peace of the abyss, of that marvelous peace which is full of activity, full of affection, full of desire, full of seeking, you know. That burning and insatiable peace which we pursue more and more after we have found it. This peace that Jesus talks about, the peace that passes all understanding. Between the peace of the heights and the quietism of the depths, there is all the difference that exists between God and a mistaken creature. Horrible error. Men seek it themselves. They establish themselves comfortably within themselves and no longer seek God, even by their desires. Yet it is not he whom they possess in their deceitful repose. Okay, I really want to know the difference. That was from Helio, page 17. Helio has condensed Ruysbroek's teaching on this point, which fills the last 4 chapters of Book 2 of Les Ornements des Nous Spiritualis. Gnosis? I can't tell if that's an N-O-C-E-S because it's a little footnote. There can be no doubt that for selves of a certain psychical constitution, this deceitful repose is only too easy of attainment. They can be willful self-suggestion. deliberately produce this they can, by willful self-suggestion, deliberately produce this emptiness, this inward silence, and luxuriate in its peaceful effects. To do this from self-regarding motives, or to do it to excess, to let peaceful enjoyment swamp active love, is a mystical vice. Okay, it sounds like spiritual gluttony that St. John of the Cross talks about a lot. And this perversion of the spiritual faculties, like perversion of the natural faculties, brings degeneration in its train, okay? So I guess it's like getting drunk all the time to just feel relaxed, instead of learning how to be silent and surrender everything to God, and that God cleans all this stuff up so that you can actually be relaxed. It's like Jesus says, do not worry about tomorrow, or what you will eat or what you will wear, any of that stuff. He teaches you how to do that without like, oh, I have to go drink something, you know what I mean? So you can do that mystically. You can get drunk mystically somehow. She's talking about it. Like perversion of the natural faculties brings degeneration in its train. It leads to the absurdities of, quote, holy indifference, and ends in the complete stultification of the mental and moral life. The true mystic never tries deliberately to enter the horizon of quiet. With St. Teresa, he regards it as a supernatural gift beyond his control, though fed by his will and love. That is to say, where it exists in a healthy form, it exists as a natural, though involuntary state, the result of normal development, not as a self-induced one, a psychic trick. It's not a psychic trick. Oh, wow. The balance to be struck in this stage of introversion can only be expressed, it seems, in paradox. The true condition of quiet, according to the great mystics, is at once active and passive. It is pure surrender, but a surrender which is not limp self-abandonment, but rather the free and constantly renewed self-giving and self-emptying of a burning love. The departmental intellect is silenced, but the totality of character is flung open to the influence of the real, with a capital R. Personality is not lost, only its hard edge is gone. A rest most busy, says Hilton, like the soaring of an eagle, says Augustine Baker, when, quote, the flight is continued for a good space with a great swiftness, but with all the great stillness, quietness, and ease, without any waving of the wings at all, or the least force used in any member, being inasmuch ease and stillness as if she were reposing in her nest. According to the unanimous teaching, there's a quote again, according to the unanimous teaching of the most experienced and explicit of the specifically theistic and Christian mystics, says von Hugel, quote, the soul's own impression of a cessation of life and energy of the soul in periods of special union with God, or of great advance in spirituality, is an appearance only. Indeed, this at such times strong impression of the rest springs most certainly from an unusually large amount of actualized energy, an energy which is now penetrating and finding expression by every pore and fiber of the soul. The whole moral and spiritual creature expands and rests, yes, but this very rest is produced by action, unperceived, because so fleet, so near, so all-fulfilling. It's always by grace. I think forgiveness is the same. I think we can try to forgive someone, but it's not excuse. A lot of what I was hearing, at the talk I was just at was, well, they were acting at the level of consciousness that they were at, or you were acting. And it's like, well, yeah, I could be driving, 100 miles an hour in an 85 mile or 75 mile an hour zone. And just because I say to the police, the man or woman, like, oh, well, I didn't know what the speed limit was. Well, if you're on that road, you're still culpable. You get a ticket because you're meant to know the speed limit, and so it's kind of like, to forgive someone is not to excuse. There's what C.S. Lewis calls that bit left over that's not excusable, even though they were in that level of consciousness. And so that's where divine love has to come in, and divine forgiveness. And you ask God to help you give grace to that person and let it go. Give grace to yourself and let it go up to God. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, as you, divine love, working in us. This same grace comes in the quiet. You can't just demand God, take me to that quiet place, you know. You make yourself available, just like I make myself available to learn guitar tomorrow is my lesson, you know. And it's just like, but I don't know what's going to happen, you know, but it's important that I set up the practice with my instructor. He's so great. Anyway. And God is great like that. God is like the best instructor. So you can just trust. There's a knowing and a trusting that God will take you to these good places, but you can't dictate to him. You have to make me feel amazing in this guitar lesson. It's kind of like that. That's what's coming to me. The great teachers of quietism have arrived at and experienced the psychological state of quiet, having known the ineffable peace and certainty, the bliss which follows on its act of complete surrender. It's utter and speechless resting in the absolute life, believed themselves to have discovered in this halfway house the goal of the mystic quest. Therefore, whilst much of their teaching remains true as a real description of a real and valid state experienced by almost all contemplatives in the course of their development, the inference which they drew from it is that in this mere blank abiding in the deeps, the soul had reached the end of her course, was untrue and bad for life. Thank God she's telling us this. Thus, Molinos gives in the spiritual guide many unexceptional maxims upon interior silence. Okay, here we go. Quote, by not speaking nor desiring and not thinking, end quote. He says justly enough of the contemplative spirit, quote, she arrives at the true and perfect mystical silence, wherein God speaks with the soul, communicates himself to it, and in the abyss of its own depths teaches it the most perfect and exalted wisdom. He calls and guides it to this inward solitude and mystical silence, when he says that he will speak to it alone in the most secret and hidden part of the heart. Just like Jesus said, when you pray, I didn't know this was going to come, go into your inner room and shut the door to all your senses, everything out there, you know. But he's not saying, you know, an arm wrestle with God, make me, you know, take me to, that's an Oasis song. Give it all away, take me to, soul slides away. It's in that song. Anyway, here Molinos speaks the language of all mystics, yet the total result of his teaching was to suggest to the ordinary mind that there was a peculiar virtue in doing nothing at all, and that all deliberate spiritual activities were bad. Okay, well, we'll go in. We'll see what he says. A good deal of the pseudo-mysticism which is industriously preached at the present time in 1910 is thus crudely quietistic. It speaks much of the necessity of going into the silence, and even with a strange temerity gives preparatory lessons in subconscious meditation, a proceeding which might well provoke the laughter of the saints. The faithful, being gathered together, are taught by simple exercises in recollection the way to attain the, quote, quiet, with a capital Q. By this mental trick, the modern transcendentalist naturally attains to a state of vacant placidity in which he rests and, quote, remaining in a distracted idleness and misspending the time in expectation of extraordinary visits, believes with a faith which many of the orthodox might envy that he is here, quote, united with his principle, with a capital P. But though the psychological state which contemplatives call the horizon of quiet is a very common condition of mystical attainment, it is not by itself mystical at all. It is a state of preparation, a way of opening the door. That which comes in when the door is opened will be that which we truly and passionately desire. The will makes plain the way, the heart, the whole man, conditions the guest. The true contemplative coming to this plane of utter stillness does not desire, quote, extraordinary favors and visitations, but the privilege of breathing for a little while the atmosphere of love. He is about that which St. Bernard called the business of all businesses, quote, end quote, goes in perfect simplicity to the encounter of perfection, not to the development of himself. So even at this, seemingly the most passive stage of his progress, his operations are found on analysis to have a dynamic and purposive character. His very repose is the result of stress. He is a pilgrim that still seeks his country, urged by his innate tendency to transcendence. He is on his way to higher levels, more sublime fulfillments, greater self-giving acts. Though he may have forsaken all superficial activity, deep, urgent action still remains. The possession of God, says Roysebrook, demands and supposes perpetual activity. He who thinks otherwise deceives himself and others. All our life, as it is in God, is immersed in blessedness. All our life, as it is in ourselves, is immersed in activity. And these two lives form one, self-contradictory in its attributes, rich and poor, hungry and fulfilled, active and quiet. The essential, end quote, the essential difference between this true active quiet and quietism of all kinds has been admirably expressed by Baron von Hugel. Quote, quietism, the doctrine of the one act, passivity in a literal sense, as the absence or imperfection of the power or use of initiative on the soul's part in any and every state. Those doctrines were finally condemned, and most rightly and necessarily condemned. The prayer of quiet and the various states and degrees of an ever-increasing predominance of action over activity, an action which is all the more the soul's very own, because the more occasioned, directed, and informed by God's action and stimulation. These and other chief lines of the ancient experience and practice remain as true, correct, and necessary as ever. Well, that didn't clarify it for me, but maybe she'll tell more. I only have like 2 pages left, so I'm going to finish even though we got to an hour. The ever-increasing predominance, so we can end this chapter, of action over activity, the deep and vital movement of the whole self, too deeply absorbed for self-consciousness, set over against its fussy surface energies here, is the true ideal of Orison. This must inform all the self's efforts towards union with the absolute life and love which waits at the door. It is an ideal which includes quiet as surely as it excludes quietism. As for that doctrine of the one act here mentioned, which was preached by the more extreme quietists, it, like all else in this movement, was the perversion of a great mystical truth. It taught that the turning of the soul towards reality, with a capital R, the merging of the will in God, which is the very heart of the mystic life, was one act, never to be repeated. This done, the self had nothing more to do but to rest in the divine life, be its unresisting instrument. Pure passivity and indifference were its ideal. All activity was forbidden it. All choice was a negation of its surrender. All striving was unnecessary and wrong. It needed only to rest forevermore and let God work and speak in the silence. This doctrine is so utterly at variance with all that we know of the laws of life and growth that it hardly seems to stand in need of condemnation. Such a state of indifference, which the quietists strove in vain to identify with that state of pure love, which seeketh not its own in spiritual things, cannot coexist with any of those, quote, degrees of ardent charity, through which man's spirit must pass on its journey to the one, and this alone is enough to prove its non-mystical character. It is only fair to Madame Guyon to say that she cannot justly be charged with preaching this exaggeration of passivity, whatever inferences a loose and fluid style may have allowed her enemies and more foolish followers to draw from her works. Quote, some persons, she says, when they hear of the horizon of quiet, falsely imagine that the soul remains stupid, dead, and inactive. But unquestionably it acteth therein, more nobly and more extensively than it had ever done before. For God himself is the mover, and the soul now acteth by the agency of his spirit, ellipsis. Instead, then, of promoting idleness, we promote the highest activity by inculcating a total dependence on the Spirit of God as our moving principle. For in him we live and move and have our being. This meek dependence on the Spirit of God is indispensably necessary to reinitiate the soul in its primal unity and simplicity, that it may thereby attain the end of its creation. Our activity should therefore consist in endeavoring to acquire and maintain such a state as may be most susceptible of divine impressions, most flexile to all the operations of the eternal world. Whilst a tablet is unsteady, the painter is unable to delineate a true copy. So every act of our own selfish and proper spirit is productive of false and erroneous lineaments. It interrupts the work and defeats the design of this this adorable artist, with a capital A on both. We must then remain tranquil and move only when he moves us, end quote. In another metaphor, the contemplative's progress must involve an advance from the active and laborious watering of the soul's garden, which he practiced in meditation, to that state of transcendence in which the river of life flows through it unchecked, wells up, as St. Teresa says, St. Teresa of Avila, in another place, from a hidden spring, and does not enter by an aqueduct from without. The living water of Christ, right? The true mystics, in whom horizon of quiet developed, to this state of receptivity, seldom use in describing it the language of holy indifference. Their love and enthusiasm in theosasm, that's what enthusiasm, theos is God. In theos, you're in God. Their love and enthusiasm will not let them do that. It is true, of course, that they are indifferent to all else save the supreme claims of love, but then it is of love that they speak. Ergo dormio et cor meum vigilat. This, ego, not ergo. Ego dormio. Anyway, this, says St. Teresa, is a sleep of the powers of the soul, which are not wholly lost, nor yet understanding how they are at work. To me it seems to be nothing else than a death, as it were, to all the things of this world, and a fruition of God. I know of no other words whereby to describe it or to explain it. Neither does the soul then know what to do, for it knows not whether to speak or be silent, whether it should laugh or weep. It is a glorious folly, a heavenly madness, wherein true wisdom is acquired, and to the soul a kind of fruition most full of delight, ellipsis. The faculties of the soul now retain only the powers of occupying themselves wholly with God. Not one of them ventures to stir, neither can we move one of them without making great efforts to distract ourselves, and indeed I do not think we can do it at all at this time. That was in the interior castle, El Castillo. All right, I just ran out of storage because I've made so many of these, right? But anyway, it's just the last two paragraphs, right? And so she says, I think it cut off right here. The faculties of the soul now retain only the power of occupying themselves wholly with God. Not one of them ventures to stir, neither can we move one of them without making great efforts to distract ourselves. And indeed, I do not think we can do it at all at this time. Here, then, we see the horizon of silence melting into true contemplation. Its stillness is ruffled by its joy. The quiet reveals itself in an essentially transitional state, introducing the self into a new sphere of activity. The second degree of ardent love, says Richard of St. Victor, binds so that the soul, which is possessed of its of it is unable to think of anything else. It is not only inseparable, but also inseparable, superable, insuperable. I don't know, maybe that's an ancient word back in the 1900s word. Insuperable, but also inseparable. He compares it to the soul's bridal, the definitive, irrevocable act by which permanent union is initiated. The feeling state, which is the equivalent of the quiet, with a capital Q, is just such a passive and joyous yielding up of the virgin soul to its bridegroom, a silent marriage vow. It is ready for all that may happen to it, all that may be asked of it, to give itself and lose itself, to wait upon the pleasure of its love. From this inward surrender, the self emerges to the new life, the new knowledge which is mediated to it under the innumerable forms of contemplation. Wow. Go Evelyn Underhill. She's married, Anglican woman, mystic. Just such a, I love her. Okay, so the next chapter we're reading is called Introversion Part 2, Contemplation. So we're talking about contemplation. And I usually show this at the beginning, so you can take a screenshot of that if it shows clear in the dark here. Because she's going to talk about what we're going to talk about. Anyway, much love. I got to go.